The gym was mostly empty that evening, the kind of late hour when the fluorescent lights hummed louder than the scattered clinks of dumbbells being racked. Mark, drenched in sweat after his final set, leaned against the cold steel of the squat rack, chest heaving, his shirt discarded on the bench beside him. He had the place practically to himself, or so he thought, until the faint sound of soft, bare footsteps echoed through the polished floor. He wiped his forehead, blinking sweat out of his eyes as a figure entered the far corner of the weight room. At first, he thought he was hallucinating. The newcomer wasn't just another late-night gym-goer. She was green. Her skin gleamed faintly, like jade catching the overhead lights, and her hair spilled in silver-white waves down her back. Mark froze halfway through grabbing his water bottle, unable to tear his eyes away. She moved with a strange, almost fluid grace, her limbs too precise, too deliberate, and when her eyes flicked to him, they glowed with a subtle luminescence that sent a chill down his spine. Mark had seen aliens before, on the news, in carefully controlled diplomatic events, but never like this. Never here in his own world, in a sweaty little gym where he bench-pressed twice his body weight to chase away stress. She wasn't wearing the ceremonial garb or armored suits he expected either. Instead, she was dressed in something fitted, something practical that clung to her body as though tailored for movement rather than show. For a moment, it felt like a dream, a surreal collision of ordinary and extraordinary. She stopped near the free weights, her gaze flicking once more to him before she seemed to focus on the rows of dumbbells lined up like metallic soldiers. Mark tried to act normal, grabbing his towel and slinging it over his shoulder, but every nerve in his body screamed awareness. He noticed the way her nostrils flared faintly, her chest rising as if she were breathing in deeply. No, savoring something in the air. It took him a second to realize what it was. Sweat. She was smelling him. The thought made his throat go dry. Mark cleared his throat, his voice rough. Hey, you. New here? It was lame, but it was all he had. The alien woman tilted her head at the sound of his voice, her eyes narrowing with curiosity, not hostility. She didn't answer right away, just took a few careful steps closer, her gaze never leaving him. Each step echoed louder than it should have, and Mark felt his pulse thudding harder than after any workout. Finally, she spoke, her voice low but resonant, carrying an unfamiliar accent that wrapped strangely around human words. You produce it. Now. Her gaze lingered on the sheen of sweat dripping down his chest and shoulders. The scent. Mark blinked, unsure whether he should laugh, panic, or run. Her words weren't aggressive, but there was something almost primal in the way she looked at him. Like a predator discovering prey, or perhaps something else entirely. Mark tried for humor, though his voice cracked. Yeah, that's called working out. You should try it sometime. But even as he said it, he noticed her pupils dilating, her breathing quickening. It wasn't just idle curiosity, she was reacting physically to being near him. Her fingers flexed at her sides and the muscles in her jaw tightened, like she was trying to hold something back. Mark's heart hammered harder, the air between them suddenly thick with tension he couldn't name. The alien took another step, and now Mark could see the faint shimmer of heat rising from her skin, a glow like embers hidden beneath her jade flesh. Her eyes darted over him, not in judgment but hunger, raw and unfiltered. Mark's instincts screamed danger. Yet there was something magnetic in her presence that rooted him to the spot. She exhaled, and it came out shaky, like someone trying to contain a fire already spreading out of control. Your kind, she whispered, her voice trembling now. Smells of storms, of heat. I was warned. She gripped the edge of a bench so tightly the steel creaked, her knuckles whitening despite her skin tone. Mark realized with a jolt that she wasn't entirely in control of herself. Whatever was happening, whatever his sweat was triggering, it was overwhelming her, and she was fighting it with everything she had. Mark's own instincts warred inside him. Part of him wanted to back away, to put distance between them before things spiraled. But another part, reckless and inexplicable, wanted to stay, to understand what this was. Humans had always been told that aliens were vastly different, that there was no overlap in biology beyond the surface similarities. Yet here was proof, undeniable and raw, that something about him had set off a chain reaction inside her. Something unpredictable. The silence stretched heavy until the hum of the lights above seemed deafening. She closed her eyes, inhaling again, and when she opened them, they burned brighter, filled with both conflict and need. Mark swallowed hard, his hands trembling despite himself. Look, he muttered, trying to steady his voice. I don't know what's happening to you, but maybe we should. He didn't finish, because she suddenly lurched forward, then stopped just inches from him, every muscle in her body taut like a coiled spring. Her proximity was electric. Mark could feel the warmth radiating off her, unnatural and fierce as though she were a living furnace. His sweat dripped down his temple, and her eyes followed the droplet like it was something precious. He could hear her breathing, ragged, uneven, restrained. Mark raised his hands slowly, palms outward. "Hey, easy, whatever this is. We can figure it out." She shook her head violently, strands of silver hair falling across her glowing eyes. "No, not figure. Feel." The word left her lips almost like a growl, and Mark realized she was teetering on the edge of something instinctual, something deeper than reason. She clutched her own arms as though restraining herself, but every second seemed to erode her control. Mark's chest tightened. He wasn't just witnessing biology. He was witnessing desperation. This wasn't a conscious choice on her part. His scent, his sweat, had lit a fire in her body that she neither asked for nor fully understood. For the first time, Mark felt a flicker of guilt mingled with fear. He hadn't done anything wrong, but simply by existing, by sweating after a workout, he had triggered something buried in her alien DNA. She stumbled back a step, gasping for air, her body trembling. "It is forbidden," she whispered hoarsely, "but it is true." Her eyes snapped back to his, filled with a mixture of shame and need. Mark took a hesitant step forward, unable to stop himself, his voice softer now. "Hey, you're not alone in this. Whatever's happening, you don't have to fight it by yourself." Her lips parted as if to reply, but no words came. Instead, her body shivered, her skin glowing hotter for an instant before dimming again. Mark could almost feel her willpower battling instinct, a war playing out in her very biology. And for reasons he couldn't quite explain, he found himself rooting for her, not against her. She wasn't a threat. She was someone drowning in something she couldn't control. The alien's knees buckled, and she braced herself against the wall, panting, her nails scratching faint grooves into the paint. Mark's throat went dry at the raw strength she displayed without meaning to. He moved closer, carefully, like approaching a wild animal. "Hey, just breathe. I'm not going anywhere." She turned her head sharply, eyes wide, staring at him with a mixture of gratitude and terror. "You don't understand," she rasped. "If I stay close, it will change." The words hung between them, cryptic but heavy with implication. Mark's skin prickled, his mind racing. What could change mean in this context? Was it her biology, his, or something that went beyond either of them? Before he could ask, she suddenly pushed away from the wall and stumbled toward the exit, her breaths harsh and ragged. Mark watched her go, torn between chasing after her and letting her have the distance she clearly needed. The echo of her footsteps faded, leaving him alone again in the humming gym. But the air still felt charged like the aftermath of lightning. Mark sat heavily on the bench, wiping sweat from his face, his mind spinning. Whatever had just happened wasn't random. It wasn't coincidence. His sweat, something so ordinary, so human, had sent her into chaos. And he couldn't shake the feeling that this was just the beginning, the first ripple of a storm neither of them understood. The next day, Mark couldn't focus on anything. Work was a blur of meaningless meetings and half-hearted tasks, his mind drifting back to the gym over and over. The look in her eyes, the tremor in her voice, the way she seemed torn apart by forces inside her, it was all burned into his memory. He barely registered the sympathetic smiles of his coworkers, assuming he was simply exhausted. If only they knew the truth. He'd locked eyes with something utterly alien, and she had almost come undone because of him. He tried to convince himself it had been a hallucination, the product of dehydration and exhaustion after a brutal workout. Maybe he'd pushed too hard and his brain had conjured up an alien woman glowing with heat and trembling with need. But the vividness of it, the raw detail, the way her breath caught as though her lungs were on fire, those weren't the kinds of things a tired mind invented. No, she was real. He'd seen her, smelled the faint metallic sweet tang of her skin in the air, felt the weight of her presence. That night, Mark returned to the gym at the same late hour, half hoping she wouldn't be there, half hoping she would. He lingered by the entrance, his nerves buzzing as he scanned the rows of machines and mirrors. At first, nothing. Just the usual quiet, the hum of lights and the clank of weights. Then, as if answering some unspoken question, she emerged again from the far side of the gym. This time, she didn't hesitate. Her eyes found him instantly, glowing faintly like embers under ice. She walked toward him with measured steps, her movements taut with control, as though every muscle was bound by invisible chains. Mark's pulse quickened, but he stayed rooted to the spot. When she finally stopped a few feet away, the heat radiating from her was unmistakable. "You came back," she said softly, her voice both accusation and relief. Mark swallowed, nodding. "So did you." For a moment, silence stretched between them, filled only by the hum of the lights overhead. Her nostrils flared again, that same instinctual reaction, and she closed her eyes briefly as though savoring something. When she opened them, her expression was conflicted but less panicked than the night before. "I thought avoiding you would stop it," she whispered. "But it only grew worse, stronger." The word sent a chill through him. "What exactly is happening to you?" he asked carefully. She tilted her head, studying him as though debating whether to trust him. Then with a resigned sigh, she answered, "You carry something in your scent. In the heat of your body. My kind was warned about it long ago. They said humans could ignite the core within us." Her hands trembled, curling into fists at her sides. Mark's breath caught. "Ignite? Like, literally?" She shook her head sharply. "Not fire, instinct, a storm inside us. We are not meant to mix. Not with you." Her voice faltered on the last words as though saying them caused her pain. Mark's mind spun with questions, but before he could ask, she suddenly shivered again, her skin glowing faintly with that strange ember-like heat. She clenched her jaw, gripping the edge of a nearby machine to steady herself. Every part of Mark screamed to step back, to give her space. But he didn't. Instead, he took a careful step closer, his voice low and steady. "Hey, you don't have to fight this alone. If it's something my body does to you, then maybe we can figure it out. Together." Her eyes snapped to his, wide and almost frightened, but not of him, of herself. She shook her head violently, hair spilling across her shoulders. "You don't understand what you're offering." Mark hesitated, then asked the question gnawing at him since last night. "What happens if you stop fighting it?" The alien woman froze, her lips parting but no sound escaping. The silence stretched so long that Mark almost thought she wouldn't answer. Then finally her voice cracked out, trembling with equal parts fear and hunger. "If I stop, I will bond. And once begun, it cannot be undone." The word hit him like a physical blow. Bond. His mouth went dry. He wanted to ask a dozen questions. What did bonding mean? Was it permanent? Dangerous? But the look in her eyes silenced him. This wasn't theoretical for her. It was raw, real, something that shook her to the core. Mark exhaled slowly, trying to steady the whirlwind in his chest. "What's your name?" he asked gently. She blinked, surprised by the simplicity of the question. "Vera," she murmured after a pause. The syllables rolled smoothly, sharp yet melodic. Mark nodded. "I'm Mark." For a moment her lips twitched, almost a smile. But then her gaze flicked again to the sweat beading along his chest. She inhaled sharply, her body trembling as though struck by an invisible force. "Mark," she whispered, his name sounding strange but intimate on her tongue. The room felt suddenly too small, the air too heavy. Mark shifted uneasily, every instinct telling him this was spiraling into something larger than either of them could control. Yet he couldn't walk away. Not when she looked at him like that. Equal parts need and terror, as though she were drowning and he was the only lifeline within reach. His heart pounded, his throat dry, but he stayed. Vera's hands curled into claws at her sides as she fought herself. "This is forbidden," she whispered harshly. "We are not to be near you." "Not like this," Mark frowned. "Then why are you here? Why not stay away?" Her eyes flicked to his, burning with an honesty she could no longer hide. "Because I cannot. Because I am already changing." The confession stole the air from his lungs. Already changing. The words echoed in his mind, heavy and inescapable. Mark stepped closer without meaning to, drawn by something deeper than logic. He could see the faint shimmer of heat rising from her again, the glow spreading across her skin like molten light. And yet beneath the alien strangeness there was a fragility to her that made his chest ache. "You don't have to be afraid," he said softly, though his own voice shook. "Whatever this is, we'll face it together." Vera's eyes widened, her lips parting as though to argue, but no words came. Instead, a low shuddering sound escaped her, halfway between a growl and a gasp. Her body trembled violently and she staggered, nearly collapsing before Mark reached out instinctively to steady her. The moment his skin touched hers, It was like electricity exploding through both of them. Vera gasped, arching into his grip, her glow flaring so bright it cast shadows across the room. Mark bit back a shout as heat seared up his arm, not painful but overwhelming, alive. For a heartbeat, they both froze, caught in the intensity of the contact, neither able to move. Then she tore herself free, stumbling back, her chest heaving, eyes wide with both terror and exhilaration. "You don't know what you've done," she whispered, her voice ragged. Mark flexed his hand, still tingling, his mind reeling. "Then tell me," he demanded, his voice firmer now. "Because whatever this is, it's not going away on its own." Vera's expression twisted, caught between resistance and surrender. Finally, she whispered the words that changed everything. "You've already begun the bond." Mark's stomach dropped. He didn't fully understand what it meant yet, but he could feel it, the invisible thread tying him to her, the fire that hadn't existed before that single touch. And he knew with a certainty that shook him that there was no turning back. The room felt alive with energy, every breath charged with unspoken consequence. Mark stood frozen, staring at Vera, who trembled as though on the edge of collapse, her eyes locked on his, filled with both fury and longing. "Now," she whispered hoarsely, "we will both pay the price." Mark barely slept that night. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw Vera's glowing skin, heard her ragged voice whispering about bonds and consequences. The phantom heat of her touch lingered on his hand, like an ember that refused to fade. He turned in his bed, sheets damp with sweat, but the unease wasn't exhaustion or fear. It was something else. Something inside him had shifted, and no amount of denial could undo it. The following evening, he avoided the gym. He tried jogging outside instead, thinking distance and fresh air might help clear his mind. But no matter how far he ran, the thought of her gnawed at him. It wasn't just attraction. It was tethered to something deeper, a pull he couldn't name. He slowed to a stop under a street lamp, breath heavy, and realized with dawning dread that it wasn't just him. Vera had said it herself. They had already begun. He lasted 2 days before the pull became unbearable. On the third night, he found himself at the gym again, driven by a gnawing compulsion. The place was dim, nearly empty. Mark half expected her not to show, but she was already there, standing by the mirrors, her silver hair cascading down her shoulders like moonlight. When her eyes met his, a faint glow rippled across her skin, and Mark's chest tightened. She hadn't run from this either. "You came back," she said, voice softer than before. Her tone held no surprise, only inevitability. Mark gave a dry laugh. "Like I had a choice." Vera tilted her head, as if hearing more truth in his words than he meant to give. Her nostrils flared again, and she drew a deep breath. "It's stronger," she admitted, trembling. "The bond grows fast. Too fast." Mark stepped closer, careful but resolute. "Then teach me. Help me understand what this means for you, for us." Vera's lips pressed into a thin line, and she shook her head. "Understanding will not save you. It will not save me either." Her voice cracked, betraying fear beneath the calm. For the first time, Mark realized she wasn't just resisting instinct. She was terrified of what would happen if she failed. "What happens if it runs its course?" he pressed. She hesitated, looking away, her hand tightening around the edge of a dumbbell rack. "Our kind was warned," she whispered. "That humans emit something we cannot withstand. That if we let it consume us, our biology changes permanently." Mark frowned. "Changes how?" She met his gaze, and in her eyes he saw both hunger and sorrow. "We cease to belong to ourselves." The words struck deep. Mark's pulse quickened, but he didn't back away. "And what about me? Do I change too?" Vera swallowed hard, visibly shaken. "You will not be untouched. The bond is not one way. It ties both. It burns through both." Her voice carried a raw honesty that sent shivers down his spine. He realized then that neither of them knew the full outcome, and that made it even more dangerous. Silence settled between them, heavy and thick. Vera's breathing was uneven, her control visibly slipping. She clutched her own arms, her skin glowing faintly again as heat shimmered in the air around her. Mark took another step closer, heart pounding. "Vera, look at me." Slowly, reluctantly, she raised her gaze, eyes blazing with restrained fire. "I can't fight it much longer," she whispered. Mark exhaled shakily. "Then maybe you don't have to." Her eyes widened at his words, a sharp inhale escaping her. "You don't understand," she said quickly. "If I let go, there is no undoing it. No return." Mark's chest tightened, but he nodded. Maybe some things aren't meant to be undone. Vera shuddered, torn between resistance and surrender. She took a shaky step toward him, then another, until the heat of her body brushed against his. Mark's breath caught, his skin tingling where their proximity blurred the line between distance and contact. Her hand twitched, hovering near his chest, but she didn't touch him. Her restraint was a battle painted across every line of her body. "I feel everything," she confessed, her voice trembling. "Your heat, your scent, the rhythm of your body. It calls to me." Mark's heart thundered in his chest, and for the first time he wondered if she could hear it. "Then listen," he murmured. "Maybe it's telling us something neither of us wants to admit." Her lips parted, and for a second Mark thought she might kiss him. But she pulled back sharply, shaking her head. "No, if I give in now, I lose myself completely. And you—" She stopped, biting off the words. Mark's frustration boiled, but he steadied himself. "Then don't think of it as giving in. Think of it as trusting me." The words seemed to rattle her. Vera's eyes searched his, desperate and afraid, as though looking for proof he could bear the weight of what she carried. Slowly, her hand lifted, trembling, until her fingertips brushed his chest. The touch was feather-light, but it sent a jolt of searing energy through both of them. Mark gasped, his skin alive with fire, while Vera let out a broken sound, half relief, half surrender. Heat flared across her body, glowing brighter now, outlining her form in molten lines. Mark steadied her trembling frame, his hands gripping her arms as though to anchor her. "Easy," he whispered, though his own voice shook with the intensity coursing through him. Vera clutched at his shoulders, her nails digging into his skin. "It's too much," she breathed. "I can't contain it." Mark pulled her closer, their foreheads nearly touching. "Then don't. Let me carry some of it." The words left him instinctively, but they rang with conviction. Vera's eyes burned into his, and for a heartbeat something in her snapped. The wall she had built, the restraint she had clung to. She let out a raw, guttural sound as the glow around her surged, enveloping them both. Mark braced himself, but instead of pain, he felt a flood of connection, emotions not his own crashing through him like a storm. Fear, desire, hunger, loneliness. All of Vera's buried instincts and feelings poured into him, binding them tighter than flesh or blood. He gasped, overwhelmed, yet he didn't let go. Instead, he held her, grounding her as the torrent raged. Vera's body shook violently, but her grip on him steadied, as though his touch was the anchor she desperately needed. Slowly, painfully, the intensity ebbed, leaving them both gasping, drenched in sweat and trembling. Vera collapsed against him, her forehead resting on his chest. "It has begun," she whispered hoarsely. "The bond is real, and now there will be no hiding." Mark tightened his arms around her, breath ragged. He didn't know what the future held, or what price they would pay for what had just been unleashed. But as her body trembled against his, glowing faintly even in exhaustion, he knew one thing for certain. Neither of them was facing this alone anymore. And somewhere deep inside, a voice whispered that this was only the beginning. The days that followed blurred into a haze of tension and change. Mark felt it in his own body, subtle at first, then undeniable. His senses sharpened, his stamina stretched beyond normal limits, and his dreams burned with images of fire and silver light. He didn't need Vera to tell him the bond was altering him too. The truth lived in every pulse of his veins, every restless hour of sleep where he woke with her name on his lips. For Vera, the transformation was fiercer. The glow that once flared in flashes now shimmered faintly beneath her skin even at rest. A reminder of the storm inside her. She spent long hours near Mark, her presence taut with restraint, but she no longer tried to deny it. She admitted once in a whisper that distance only made the bond more volatile. Being apart left her racked with trembling fits, while closeness steadied her, anchored her. They met secretly, always at night. The gym became their sanctuary, though Mark now understood it was dangerous to keep meeting there. Cameras, witnesses, questions neither of them could afford. But Vera insisted on routine. The familiar walls gave her control, a reminder that she was not entirely lost to the bond. And Mark, despite the risk, couldn't deny the strange comfort of sweat, steel, and shadows surrounding their impossible connection. One night, as Mark finished a grueling set, Vera appeared without sound, watching him from the mirror's reflection. He'd grown used to her sudden entrances, but this time something in her gaze was different. It wasn't just hunger or restraint. It was fear. "They know," she whispered when he turned. "My people. They sense the change in me. They will come." The words chilled him more than the night air. Mark set the weights down slowly. "What happens if they find us?" Vera's expression twisted. "They will take me. Break the bond if they can. And me if they cannot." Her voice carried no drama, only fact. Mark's fists clenched. The thought of losing her, of watching her ripped away because of something neither of them chose, was unbearable. "Then we don't let them," he said firmly. Vera stepped closer, shaking her head. "You don't understand. They are powerful. Older than your species' history. They will not bargain." Mark met her glowing eyes, jaw set. "Then let them come. I'm not letting you face this alone." His defiance startled her, and for a flicker of a moment a small smile ghosted across her lips. "You are reckless," she murmured. "But perhaps recklessness is what I need." The following evening proved her warning true. Mark walked into the gym and she was already there, but not alone. 2 others stood beside her, their skin darker shades of jade, their eyes glowing brighter than hers. They radiated authority, their postures rigid, their gazes sharp. Mark froze, adrenaline spiking as their eyes turned to him in unison. Vera stepped between them instantly. "No," she said fiercely. "He is mine," the tallest of the aliens hissed, voice cold. "He is poison. His kind corrupts. You know this." Vera trembled but didn't yield. "Then let me be corrupted. I will not sever the bond," the second alien sneered, stepping closer. "You dishonor your people." Vera's glow flared, bright and defiant. "Then I will carry that dishonor." Mark's heart pounded. He had never seen her so fierce, so unyielding.